Got it.
All right. Good morning. And I know that it's still not spring, but it's nice and warm right there, actually, by the glass, with the sun beaming on you. So, welcome to this session of Tech Topics. I see a good crowd. Great, fantastic. So, there must be a lot of interest here. And actually, it's good because what we're going to talk about today is really the way the CMS is changing. And one aspect of it is its governance, the IT governance. I know in the past it has been all the horror stories that we have heard in the past about how burdensome it is, how onerous it is. There is no help, no one to help you navigate through the process, no pun intended, and you hear more about that. So what we really want to do today, and as you can see, we have IT governance. It's all about the new name, the TLC, in terms of how CMS is working to streamline the process. At the same time, our goal and our vision is really to enable the teams. It's not to be a barrier. Yes, we need to comply with a lot of things, right? Because we are the federal government. But there's ways to do that without being so onerous about it. And what you're going to hear from the teams today and from me is how we're moving in that direction and how we're providing a new service called the Navigator. And the Navigator is a new offering that, and I don't want to steal the thunder from the team, but really it's about helping you. It's about being that concierge service to you for those that need it and try to move you through the IT world. And part of it is OIT, and part of it may be other sides of the IT world as well, right? But we want to make that connection, all the knowledge that we have within, using the TRB resources, using myself as a resource because I have a lot of knowledge as well, a lot of contacts. I can help the team. I myself could be a navigator to help some of the executives, some of the leadership, even the team themselves, right? So that's our goal, is to sort of transfer this information, capture, but enable you to move forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the team because I know there's a lot of good information. So we're good? Excellent.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Aaron Plinus. I also have Phil Kendall here, who's going to be going through the Navigator part, and a member of my team, Ann Rudolph, who's going to be helping assist on questions and go forward. So really want this to be an interactive session. I want to hear your questions and comments and concerns about things. The way we've developed what we're calling the target life cycle is it's meant to be flexible. It's not completely designed yet, and it's done that way on purpose. So I want to hear some of the things that you guys think are good, some of the ways that you guys think aren't quite going to work, or some things that maybe we quite haven't even thought out yet. Okay, so I'm going to start with this. This is a few different diagrams of the CMS Expedited Lifecycle, or the XLC. It's not really intended that you can read those. It's just that there's a lot of stuff up there. So before you even get started on the XLC, you have to take basically a test, which you guys can still see, okay, which tells you whether or not, what complexity level you are. That test isn't exactly easy to start with. I tried doing it myself for an old system I used to do, and I was like, man, I don't really know where to go with half of these questions. So right off the bat, you're starting somebody at a disadvantage. Then we have what's kind of hidden underneath there is the project process agreement, or the PPA, and that's supposed to be kind of like your roadmap. So it's like 58 different artifacts that you're supposed to determine whether or not they apply to your particular program. It's a little crazy. And then to the right, we have the 10 different phases of the XLC all the way through. There's 13 gate reviews that you're supposed to have between your project, between the TRB, and you're supposed to be updating all of those artifacts all the way throughout. Really complex, really difficult for business owners to understand, really difficult for any project team to even follow. So the leadership was looking at how can we do this differently. So we take our cue from HHS. This one is the Enterprise Performance Lifecycle. And so you can see this is a little bit more streamlined, but it's not enough. It just gives you sort of like a window dressing of what you're supposed to do from project management. It doesn't really go down into details of how you want to do things and how things should be done. They do start to split out security reviews a little bit differently, so they're separated out here. And they also delegate a bunch of reviews to the project teams. So don't tell HHS we're not exactly following everything here. No, but we have talked with HHS and we plan to continue that, but we haven't completely decided where target lifecycle is going yet. So we aren't going to say, hey, on this particular part of the EPLC, we are or are not going to follow it differently. We're going to do things in different ways. All right, so all that being said, before we go into all of this a little bit, I just wanted to talk a little bit about background so you can see where this is coming from. And this isn't just some random thing that we just kind of came up with all of a sudden. So my background is in Center for Medicare. I was an IT guy on the business side, worked in the Medicare Enrollment and Appeals Group. And so I was just after the Marks redesign happened, and they integrated payment and enrollment functions, and they really did a lot of really cool things. So I was able to come in and see just the efficiency of how that change happened and that occurred. I also spent a little bit of time in enterprise architecture, so learning about how we do things like the system census, how we categorize data, how we have this rich resource of information that we pull once a year and get all this information from. And then I'm always a security guy at heart too, so my background is in IT security. So I was an ISSO back when I was working, that's System Security Officer, working back in the enrollment and appeal systems. So I really saw when Ryan Brewer came into the agency and instituted the acceptable risk safeguards and all of the CMS security controls that you need to follow, the number of system families that are involved. So we really developed a rich security program. And you can start to see some of the elements as we go through the target lifecycle of how those particular things that have worked well have influenced how we approach the target lifecycle. Okay, so there are really kind of two key concepts before we get into the target lifecycle that I want you to kind of understand. If you filled out the system census from enterprise architecture before, that's going to give you a good understanding of what we're looking to do here. So the first thing that we have is we're going to establish sort of like a continuous monitoring exercise for IT governance. So we're going to start with that system census information that we have from the agency, and we're going to pull out key fields from that system census, and we're going to build out a profile of a system. So the production profile of this system is going to be a steady state. Once you go into production for the first time, we'll understand what your base layers of information are, the type of information that you're storing, the data center that you're running at, the type of software and versions and things that you're running. Those are all existing things that are in the system census. So instead of doing that once annually now, we're going to set up a baseline for that once you go into production. Then we're going to measure changes as you go through the year. If you have changes to those particular aspects of your system, we're going to have sort of like analytics behind the scene, which we're calling triggers at this point, to try and identify, is that change something that is meaningful enough that we need to have some type of governance activity associated with it? So let's just say, for example, that you're storing beneficiary information, you're a Medicare beneficiary database, enrollment database type system, and all of a sudden you're going to start tracking provider enrollment information. Well, that's not exactly the base case that you set up when you started your system. That's a whole new kind of area that you're starting to dive into. So we want to talk with you about and see where exactly is your system going in the future and make sure that everybody understands and agrees with the direction you're trying to go in, because there might be other systems that are already doing those things. There might be other data that already exists that you don't know about. So these are the things that we're trying to get into, and I think you'll hear George talk about it later. We're trying to get into situational governance reviews rather than prescribed kind of point-in-time governance reviews. This monitor is killing me because it keeps going out. Okay, so next, the other thing is the annual business owner attestation. So we want to make sure that the business side is involved. We know that you guys that are running those business systems are aware of the governance activities that need to occur and are staying in line with the program management activities that need to occur. We just want to make sure that the business owner is also aware that, number one, we have this new profile thing that's out there for your system. And then number two, whenever you're doing a production release, you need to take a look at that list of activities and say, hey, is there anything in here that's based on our next release is going to change? If so, I need to make sure that my program team is updating and making those changes in my profile. So the whole point of this is that we have a system profile that is updated all the time. And that's kind of like the golden standard of enterprise architecture, is you want to have this data set that is completely up to date at all times, so then we can really start doing some good analytics and making some really informed decisions on things like when should we do an enterprise license agreement for a particular product, or when is the time to retire a product? Are we out of support for a particular software piece or platform? Those are things that we can do with analytics rather than let's call you in 7 times throughout your life cycle to talk to the TRB and dig into your design and make you spend 2 hours talking to us to kind of really get down to the meat of why we would want you there. So those 2 concepts really allow us to remove a lot of what we have in the expedited lifecycle IT governance. So think, instead of all these documents that we have of dozens, hundreds of pages of requirements documents, or how TRB mega decks for everything that could be under the sun when we only want you there to talk about your firewalls. Those are the kind of things that we're trying to move away from with the old XLC. And now it's going to be, hey, you just changed your data center location. That hit trigger number 13. We want to make sure that you're aware of the different things that go along with moving from your data center to the Baltimore data center to AWS. It might just be an email. It might just be a phone call by somebody following up. And they can say, oh yeah, we talked with Steve Every, who's back there in the corner, runs the TRB. We talked with him, he agreed with everything, everything's fine. Steve, thumbs up, yep, thumbs up, everything's great. Okay, we can just say, no governance review needed, or already checked in with TRB. And that's it, you just move forward then. And then, again, I talked about this a little bit already. So we have the EA data set as the latest and greatest, and it allows us to make some more informed decisions. Okay, and this is kind of the sort of enterprise architecture in a nutshell. It's being able to link data elements across various systems to be able to create lines and connect things that aren't otherwise connected. So this is just an example of some of the types of information that we're getting from the different systems. We want to pull all of those things internally to a single shared data set that we can then use to run analytics on. We can use to do things like visual dashboards to show all the different software we have across the agency, to show things, how many users are involved in various systems. We can look at what are the major investments we have, and is our budget aligning with what we think are our major systems and mission essential functions. So really pulling all this information, linking all this information together is really going to get us to a good place where everybody can have transparency of, well, what exactly does my system mean here in the agency, and where exactly am I heading with the data that I'm storing? And if I'm trying to go in a new direction, are there other systems that are already doing those things that we can then link up and talk to? All right, so I'm going to move to the next one, because this is kind of the meat of the target lifecycle. So,
It's good behind you.
yeah. Okay, so we're changing things quite a bit, as you can tell. There's a lot less phases, there's a lot less touch points. We're really loosening things up quite a bit. So what we are doing, though, is we are changing the way that we integrate with our business owners through the governance activities, but we're also putting a lot more onerous activities on what we're calling the initiate phase, which is requesting budget for a system, hiring a contractor, everything. We want to make sure you've talked with enterprise architecture about the data that you're going to be storing, making sure that function doesn't already exist somewhere. We want to make sure you've talked to the TRB and you have a decent technical design and you're moving forward with an appropriate technical design, and it's not going to be a gotcha later with security of, hey, you just stood up a whole new data center and you guys are in big trouble because you didn't get authority to operate. So all of that is going to lead up into what we're calling the intake function there. That's the vertical gray bar. And that is going to be a new board that we're going to institute. And I know, a new board. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to consolidate all of the functions and activities of the other boards that have already existed. So what you don't see in here is technical review board number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. And that's not to say that the TRB doesn't exist. I'm going to hit on that a little bit later. It's just not the most efficient way to engage the technical review board. So we're going to have this board that's going to be more of making decisions at the pre-investment level. So we're going to be making sure that our investments are sound, are well thought out, and that the direction is well thought out. Once we get there and we obtain the budget, then you go out and start what we're calling the develop phase. That's everything from gathering requirements to design to development to test. That's everything pre-production would fall into that phase. And you can see it's a big old block. We don't really specify a lot of different things of how things have to be done in there. That's going to be for you guys to work out with your business owners of how exactly are we going to design, develop the system. What framework are we going to follow? Are we going to do a waterfall framework? Are we going to do an agile framework? That's for you guys to decide and determine within this box. The next phase, well, we have the update there in the middle, and I'll get to that. But the next phase we have is the operate phase. So that is when everything is in production state. So we have everything pre-production, and we have everything post-production. You can see there's a big yellow square around both of those. The reason for that is there's very rare times when a system goes in production and it just sits there and it's operations and maintenance and it's patches and stuff only. Almost never happens. So you're simultaneously going to be in multiple phases with target lifecycle. You're going to be in an operate phase where you have your production, steady state operations and maintenance. And then you're also going to have your develop phase where you're looking at what is my next release looking towards, what is the functionality that I need to include now. So all of that is going to be happening in the orange phase, and you'll also have a state in the green phase. In order to get your latest instance from an orange phase to a green phase, all you're going to have to do is update your profile. It's not going to be an operational readiness review with the TRB that you've got to fill out a whole big deck and everything for. You're not going to have to schedule a meeting 3 weeks in advance or anything like that. You're going to go into the system, you're going to update your system profile, and then we will contact you if there's any additional things that are situationally needed based on the updates that you've done. And I don't have the entire form filled out here. I think it'll be important for you guys to see. But that particular form is very high-level information, and we showed it on the last slide. It's things like, what type of data are you storing? Are you storing beneficiary data? Are you storing provider data? Do you support a missional essential function? Are you a payment function? Do you support an enrollment function? So if any of those types of high-level activities are changing, I would really think you would want to talk with somebody, and you're not just kind of like going off in a whole new direction with your system on your own, having talked to no one. So then we have, of course, the retire phase. I think I could probably count on my 2 hands how many I've been involved in on that, so we don't do that too often around here. Things kind of stay forever. But and you can see there's no barrier to get from operate to retire. It's really just a decision that we're going to retire. But in order to really close out the system, we have a checklist. That's actually the same checklist that we had under the XLC. It's a really good cross-section of all the things you need to do. You need to look at like records retention and security and closing that out in CFAX, lots of other boring stuff, so I won't go through all that. But there's really a lot of steps you need to go through to make sure that we're compliant with everything we need to from a retire state. I would be remiss, and the security people would kill me if I didn't bring it up. So you didn't see security anywhere in here. It's down here at the bottom, and we have security authority to operate process. The security ATO process is not going away at all whatsoever with the target lifecycle. It will remain exactly how it is today. There are lots of different deliverables and activities that need to go along with the authority to operate process. But what we've done is we've split that out from your governance activities to support overall target lifecycle implementation. So what you will see down there is the deliverable. We have the first time that you're going from a development phase to an operate phase, you have to have an authority to operate. That is a very, very loaded statement. There's a lot of things and activities that go along with that, but it doesn't make sense to completely riddle the entire system development process with everything security. They have a very well-defined program. It exists elsewhere. They have all the documents laid out that you need to comply with. So we just say, hey, at this point, you need to have an authority to operate. We also have a guidance document that we're circulating around right now across the agency in Swift. That's kind of the best way that we have to just kind of disseminate documents for review across the agency. So within that guidance document right now, it says at this point in this process, you should be considering these things for security. So we talk about here's target lifecycle, but here's the related governance activities that you should also be doing. So we're working very closely with ISPG to make sure we have all those right things in place. Okay. So the other thing that we have here are the available OIT resources. So we're going to have a new team, which is what we're calling the governance review team. It's actually very similar to how the CMS intake review team operates today. So they receive, all projects will fill out an informational form. They then come to the CERT meeting and kind of talk about the project. The CERT then tries to help direct them to who are the right people to integrate with and talk to. But I think we're going to do things a little bit differently. It's not going to be an automatic come and talk to us sort of meeting. We're going to look at your system and say, looks like you're pretty good. Okay, go forward, here's your number. Or we're going to say, well, there's some things you should probably consider. There's some other systems that are already diving into this area. We want to make sure that you've talked with them. Or it could be, hey, come in and talk to us. There's definitely some concerns we have about how this project is moving forward. Then, of course, there's the technical review board, and I think we have a session later talking about how the TRB is changing, so I don't want to steal that thunder at all. But I think we've made a lot of great strides there already. Used to be on the TRB myself, so TRB is a fantastic resource to give you some real technical insight into your design or specific new software implementations that you're doing. So we've built a lot of those, what we call situational reviews throughout this governance process. So as you hit those triggers, the situational governance activity may be you need to go and talk to the technical review board. We're also going to have an online resource center, which is really just examples of compliance with target lifecycle. So we understand that there are areas across CMS that have really robust IT shops. They have system development frameworks picked out. They have a whole board that operates just like the technical review board operates. We don't want to get in the way of all of that. But there are also people that don't have those robust IT shops. For those that don't, OIT will always be there to support your program and your platform. So what we want to show, because we've kind of stripped away all of those XLC prescribed documents, we want to show examples of how other projects that have those more robust IT shops are complying with these individual phases of the target lifecycle. So that's really the point of that resource center that we're going to have, is just saying, hey, for the requirements underneath the development phase, if you're waterfall, you have a system requirements specification document. Here's the big deck and platform for all of that. You can fill out something similar to this, laying out all of your requirements. Or if you're more agile, here's a project that tracks all of their requirements in Jira. Here's a page of their project, this is the level of their user stories, and this is how they comply with the requirements part of the target lifecycle. So it's really just to be examples, not to be prescribing how you do things. Of course, enterprise architecture is also a resource there. That's more to talk about how the data links together, or the type of data that you'll be storing, maybe talking about your database schema a little bit too. A lot of great resources there in enterprise architecture. They could also do a business process model with you if you're really changing your process a lot. It kind of sometimes makes sense to kind of sit down and plot out your current process and do your as-is process to where you're trying to go. It really kind of helps identify some requirements that you may not have thought of in the change. They also do a lot of other great things like operational views that kind of give you pictures, high-level pictures of how the system interactions are going to work. So can't talk highly enough about EA. And then, of course, we have the Navigator. So Phil is going to talk about that a little bit.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. I'll take this from you. Thanks a lot. All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Philip Kendall. I'm in OIT, and I'll talk a little bit about the OIT Navigator. So this is a new initiative that we recently established due to the need for customer service. So when you think of OIT, you don't normally think about customers. But OIT does provide a lot of services to internal and external CMS customers. So our CIO has a big emphasis on improving our customer service throughout OIT and really throughout CMS for any type of systems development or business process changes that are needed throughout OIT. So last year we did a human-centered design effort where we looked at some of our processes. We've interviewed nearly 70 people internal to OIT as well as throughout CMS in the regions. So we took a look at our process. We asked questions around, the level of engagement throughout OIT, and we learned some things. So we did learn that our customers are really anxious in the initiation phase of the process. So when their initial engagement with OIT, customers they're really anxious, as well as in the planning stages. So just understanding what are the next steps to accomplish their mission. So we did take a look at some of that feedback, and then we also took a look deeper into that feedback and understood that a lot of folks think that our process is really overwhelming. So I know we have different flavors of customers. So we have some that are more on the business side, and we have highly technical folks that may understand everything that Aaron just described. I'm not that person, so I'll say that I can resonate with the folks that need a little more assistance with understanding the XLC and understanding the governance process throughout OIT. The communication was one thing that we also felt the need to take a look at as well. So with that, we actually looked at those results, and we heard specifically that it will be helpful for someone to actually be available in OIT to help navigate through the process. So another thing that we heard is that we need to look at reviewing our process and continuing to review the process and the resources available to our customers, not only in person but also online. And we're really taking that seriously. So we have established the OIT Navigator. So why is it important to have an OIT Navigator? Just like I said, positive customer experience is going to help us all in achieving our goals of our systems development and really serving our beneficiaries. So having someone available that can help you walk through the different process really saves us time, it saves us money and resources from really figuring out what steps to take or the rework that's available with actually having to do things over again that that you could have had someone guide you through in the first place. So this is really going to help us deliver products to our customers and our beneficiaries. All right. So how can a navigator help you? So our goal is to really be the integrator between the customer and OIT. So we want to help guide you through the process. So as Aaron mentioned, we're currently on the XLC, but we're transitioning to the TLC. So customers are going to need help to get through that process and understand the touch points. So we'll be there to help them to get through that process. As well as we want to bridge the gap between our customers, our business owners, as well as our subject matter experts. What we can do is we're empowered to pull together a team to discuss a business need or discuss an issue to get a quick resolution. Without actually initiating the intake process, we're here as a consultant to our CMS customers to talk through an idea, or if they need help to develop a roadmap and initiate the actual intake process, we're available for that as well. All right, so we also assist with planning and implementation. So if you need a heavier touch than just guiding you to the direct place to go, we can actually integrate with your team to help you with your implementation. And also, we respond to general inquiries. So if you have an inquiry and you just really don't know where to go, you can reach a navigator and we can help you guide you in the right direction. I will say that the OIT navigators are not replacing existing services. So we will integrate with existing services, including the various boards that Aaron described, as well as if you're having problems that you can't get resolved at the help desk, we'll help you with those issues as well. All right, so for our implementation status, so we've already actually begun the Navigator project. We're in a pilot phase right now. We did just have a soft launch with OAGM, OHC, and CCSQ. In which we're providing services to those components. We have navigators assigned to projects, and we're actively working this process, and it's actually working pretty well. We're actually collecting feedback and really refining the process as we go along in preparation for our full launch in May 1st. So we plan to launch this to the full agency May 1st, and this service will be provided to the entire agency. So all right, I was hoping that the right slide was up there. I can't see it. So all right, so our website, our email address is there. So if you want any additional information on OIT Navigators, you can feel free to send us an email, and we can talk more about the OIT Navigator. And we're also already integrated with CERT. So our team is inserted into the CERT process. So if there's a large need for OIT Navigator, we're able to assist the CERT team in doing some of that integration as well. All right. So I'll pause here to see if, oh, I'm sorry.
No. We want to go, yeah, I think we'll go through this, and then we'll address a whole bunch of questions. Okay. Okay, so, yes, we have the right slide up there. Okay, so this is just kind of give you an idea of where we were with everything and where we're heading with target lifecycle implementation as well. So we're starting here with our draft guidance. So we released through SWIFT, and it's open for agency-wide comment. Prior to that, I want to at least talk about like where we were before, because I don't think I put it on here. Nope. So what we started with, because we wanted to have some credibility in what we were trying to do, was we looked at all of the regulations and policies that handle IT governance and all the laws and regulations that cover those things. So yes, we did read through FITARA and FISMA and OMB A11 and OMB A130, and we read through all that stuff line by line. We put together a great Excel spreadsheet because I never wanted anybody else to ever have to go through that again because it was awful. So we have a spreadsheet where we mapped all of the requirements within those different federal laws and regulations to what we needed to do. So explicit requirements, which were you have to have an annual operational analysis type of thing. That's an OMB requirement. From the A130 type of stuff to the more ethereal things, which are you have to have some type of program that has the CIO as part of your approval process for IT investment. So we captured those primary requirements, and then we captured secondary requirements as well. Really painstaking process, and I really thank the team that was involved in that, helping me with it. It was Octo Consulting, Jyoti Padala as well, and Ann was fortunate enough to come on after some of that was already done. So we did that, and we put together this huge Excel spreadsheet with all kind of things mapping back to all these laws and policies. That was to really give what we were trying to do credibility. When we did all that, we found, let's take all those requirements and let's map them to the XLC. And what we actually found is there wasn't a lot that was mapped. There really isn't much that was required explicitly from the XLC. Now, does that mean all that XLC stuff is not good? No, it doesn't. There are a lot of best practices. There are a lot of things over the years that we found that can be incorporated into things. Our just past way of doing it was, well, let's build a 20-page template and have people fill that out. So I think we're trying to find what are the different ways in which we can do that so that we can capture those requirements that we need without throwing templates at people and having 58 different artifacts that we need people to fill out. All right, so I can blab a lot. Let me go forward here. So we then are working with the agency on feedback. So we want to continue working through that over the next couple of months. Right after we did all those law reviews and policies, we came up with the idea, which was the slide you saw before of the various phases. It was really in a few days we kind of came up with that, and we presented it to OIT leadership. We then went on a tour across the agency and kind of talked that thing through and walked around to the various components and said, hey, what do you guys think of this? Does this resonate with you? How are you handling with the XLC? And they said, oh, we're not. It's horrible. We're not even following it. In some instances. And then we had other instances where, yeah, we do it, but it's really costly. Our contractors have to charge us a lot of money for following all these different phases and everything. So they said, this is a great move in the right direction. It completely aligns with our thing, but we have our thing. Here's this box, and this is how we do it. And it goes from step 1 through step 10 up to production. Then you go to another component, and they say, here's step 1 through step 10 of how we do it, and it's completely different. And they said, don't touch our thing. Our thing's great. It works for us. So that's why you see kind of the big, broad boxes around the requirements section and the operations section, because components have kind of figured that out for them, and we wanted to leave it open and flexible so each component could put their own spin on how they do those things. Okay, then we're hoping between April and June timeframe to look towards what we're calling a CIO directive. We don't want to issue the target lifecycle as policy at that point, because what we want is we want the policy to go out, but we want it to be flexible enough that we can still change it and we can still kind of fix some things that maybe we didn't think of, or we can add some more triggers to some things. So this is going to be fine-tuned over the next year or so, but we're hoping we're going to put this out, and then we're going to give people some time to switch over from XLC coordination to target lifecycle and compliance there. So you can see it goes all the way out to June 2020. So we're thinking from April to June will be, hey, TLC's coming. You have a year to get on board. Start getting with it if you haven't heard about it yet. And then hoping you guys can kind of be the emissaries to go back to your components and say, hey, there's this great new thing, the target lifecycle out there. If you haven't heard of it, there's a guidance document that's out there in Swift. Can you make sure that I get a copy of that thing? Because I want to make sure that I can comment on it and that it's going to work for our processes. All right, and then I'm going to switch over to the next one. So this is kind of like the guidance to policy and how we plan to get there. Did that change? Yes, okay. So and this is how we get from pilots to the agency establishment. So we're running pilots right now. We have about 10 of them. It's cross-section across multiple components from the agency. We have CCSQ, OHI, CM, we have OIT, we have a whole bunch of different components participating. Some are waterfall, some are agile, some are somewhere in between, some are in production now, some are not in production yet. So it's really a good test for us to kind of take a look at how things are occurring and to help us kind of formulate those triggers as we go forward. So we're going to work, we talked about that resource center a little bit. We're hoping that those teams can kind of help us define what that resource center is going to look like. So how do you guys think you could comply with the requirements? Oh, here's our JIRA site, here's our user stories, here's how we do things. Okay, great, that would satisfy requirements. Let's use that as an example so that others across the agency can benefit from this is one way of how you can do things. Then between February and June, we want to look at refining those triggers. So as these systems go through and they have their production releases or program increments, we want to make sure that we are tracking all the things that we need to track. So we're kind of like up in their business more than we normally would, and it's so that later on we don't have to bother them. So we're trying to figure out what are all the false positives and things that are hitting triggers that shouldn't be hitting, and what are the things that we're missing as well, that things like, oh, we really should have a trigger for that, but there isn't one that exists today. Then one of the other big things we're doing is changing that review process from the approval board and governance and everything. So I talked about the governance review team. I talked about that new sort of intake review board. We don't have names for all these things on purpose yet, so we still are just kind of formulating everything and making sure it's going to work. So we have a draft proposal in that guidance document about who's on that board and what it does, but again, it's draft. And then between April and June, we're hoping to complete the pilots. I think after a few months of operations, we'll at least hit one of those quarterly releases for the systems that do more quarterly. We'll hit about 5 or 6 releases from those Agile folks. So I think we'll have a good idea of testing out those triggers and how those things work. Then all along the bottom there is we're working on developing sort of like a central database tracking tool of tracking that profile. So we're going to create that initial profile, then we're going to have updates to that profile, and based on those updates, again, we'll determine whether or not we hit triggers for those particular activities. I think that is it. Let me just add one more thing too. One of the biggest things that we're hearing as naysayers for this particular thing is, you're telling me now I have to update my profile every single time I do a production release. Well, I do a production release 18 times a day. I couldn't possibly, I mean, so that's kind of unrealistic. But even 7 times a month we do releases. I couldn't possibly go through and update my entire system census all the time. We're not asking you to update your system census. We're only saying, has anything fundamentally changed about your system? So when you see that profile, you'll see fundamental things or what we're looking for changes in. And even with that, we still have people saying, well, that's a lot of work to do. And I would say, okay, well, you have an authority to operate, right? Well, yeah. Okay, well, there's 26 security families with the authority to operate, right? Well, yeah. And is there anybody from ISPG here? How many total controls? I think it's over 400. I don't know, George, you know? So at least over 400 controls that you're supposed to be evaluating every single time you do a release. So if you're doing those over 400 controls, you can look at the 10 high-level categories of data that we're asking for a system profile. It's really not that hard. Okay? So I think that's everything we had. Again, I really want this to be interactive. Really, please come up, ask questions, talk about whether you think this is good, you think this is bad, it's not going to work for you guys. So really want to, yeah, so the microphone's right here in the middle if you have questions for either
You may
myself
need
or
to
the
turn it
navigator.
on, by the way, the microphone.
Got it.
Go ahead. Yes.
Good morning, Aaron. That was an amazing presentation to your whole team. This is long overdue. So thank you for falling on the sword to make it happen. A couple of real quick questions. When you make a major change like this to a program in the agency, does it require department level approval or HHS approval in order to push it through?
It doesn't, so changes to a system and functionality don't require department level approval.
No, I mean changes to a process like this, like going from XLC to TLC.
Oh, yes, it absolutely will. So we've already kind of briefed this a little bit with the department and some folks within the department, but we will have to talk to the department about, hey, that EPLC, you say it's required for all optives. We're following it to the most part. We need a waiver for a couple other things, but the way that we're following some of the other things is we're going to do it differently, and here's how we're going to do it differently. So that's definitely going to have a discussion that we're going to have with the department.
Okay, because that leads into the other part that I was going to ask. It seems like every OpDev has their own version of some XLC, right? And so this, I think, would be a great opportunity to share a best practice across the department to really start getting the best interest of the government as a priority, because all the money that's spent on all this. Anyway, the other question though is, how do you envision projects that started out in the XLC cutting over to the TLC, or do you expect them to just run out their entirety using the XLC and then convert over for a new program?
Yeah, no, definitely not, and thank you for that question. So what we're looking, again, is a transition time frame, and we're thinking about a year is what it might take to take all the 176 systems that we have across the agency and transition them over. But what we want them to do is we'll grandfather in all of the blue phase initiate activities that already happened for that system. They went through CERT, they went through TRB, all of that sort of happened already. And we're going to say, now you're just going to build your baseline profile. And once you've baselined your profile, congratulations, you're now part of TLC.
Good morning. Is there a visual somewhere that shows this new process superimposed on the acquisition process so that we can understand in terms of when we're loosing acquisitions or putting together new stuff, where in the acquisition process we should be looking for some of these critical milestones to be completed or at least initiated?
So acquisition, that's another topic for Tech Topics, actually. They are going to come here and present what we're doing in terms of improving the collaboration in the front-end piece. I know that's something that is behind the scenes from the outside world, but they're going to come up and see. Internally, we're working. There's a system, a project right now that is called CALM, and they will be talking about how they're going to improve and automate a lot of those processes. Kind of like the same concept, right? This is where you are, this is how much you got left to do, and how that's going to, trying to automate a lot of the things. So, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just add, so acquisition investment, we don't really believe is part of a system development life cycle. It is it is definitely ancillary to and part of the whole process of system development, though. So where I was talking before, where we have parts in there where we say related governance, we're also working very closely with our investment team and OAGM to say, here are the steps you should be taking towards your investment in your acquisition process as well. So just a nice light touch connects you to another process altogether, but we're trying to at least make sure that the development lifecycle or the TLC document has what you need for governance, but it also points you to what you need for the other things in order to make your system functional.
So I know we have over 200 people on the WebEx. So can we open up the lines? And for those on the WebEx, can you please use the virtual hand in order to ask the question?
Hi, Jason. Do you have a question?
Okay, go ahead.
Hi there, Jason Ford here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hey, great. Thanks for taking my question, and guys, thanks for the presentation. I concur with the previous folks. I've been keeping a pulse on this through documentation, and I think the overhaul long overdue. Like where it's going, and I really appreciate the thoughtful approach you've taken to it. Couple of questions. If I may, I'll just lay them both out and let you respond, hopefully fairly simple. You reference in slide 2, you don't have to go back to it, just the word monitoring, and then throughout it the word triggers. And that actually led me to ask the question, are you talking about manual things, triggers like emails suggesting that something is moving from data center to data center, or are you actually talking about building technologies that integrate with ours and look at our IT architecture and infrastructure and observe it in an automated fashion? Are you actually talking about technical triggers? And if so, do you have any documentation about where you're headed with that our teams can consider in terms of what the impacts might be to our systems? And then the second question I have is, you mentioned a board that's sort of a governance board. I am actually curious about sort of the teeth of this process. So, when you suggest that you might come back to a team and say, appreciate what you're doing, but check out what these other teams are doing. They may be further along. Like, what kind of teeth is in this process that suggests you have, like the security team, the teeth there, in my opinion, would be the ATO, right? You have an ATO and you can operate. You don't and you can't. So, what does the sort of the teeth of this process look like? Those are my two questions. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you. And send me your address so I can send you the $5 later for asking those questions. I appreciate it. Those are great questions. So number one with the monitoring and the triggers. So we have laid out a whole bunch of different triggers. It is within the guidance document that is out for circulation right now. They are like general, most basic triggers we could kind of think of to just give an example of the types of triggers we're looking to do. So yes, it would be everything from sending out an email to your ISSO saying, hey, your ATO is about to expire in 100 days. Make sure you're working on your package to renew your ATO kind of thing. To, hey, they are saying that they're changing their data center in their next release, and which should trigger a technical review board review or somebody to take a look at their design and their architecture. We're not as fancy at this point to be able to say we're diving down into design and looking at things like we used to on TRB, like you have multi-level firewalls of different vendors and things like that. I'd love to eventually get there. I do see maybe 2, 3, 5 years into the future that we have hundreds of triggers, and that's not meant to scare people. You want to see the triggers as sort of like warning signs, not more of, oh, equals TRB review. That's not the purpose for these triggers. It's supposed to be the warning flags so that we don't need a highly specialized person sitting and reviewing that system at all times to determine what are the governance steps that need to happen. You're supposed to have a systematic, analytical approach to what exactly needs to happen next or who should be taking a closer look at these things. So I hope to eventually get there. For the governance board question with the teeth, one of the slides that I did cut out of here because I thought it was a little too much detail, but happy to talk about it, is the way that we plan on implementing this. If we're also going to do some real-time testing of the profile and how you fill things out. So we're going to use some tools to go down into your database, look at your database schema, make sure you're tracking what you say you're tracking. If we find some of those things that are not supposed to be in there or you haven't reflected on your profile, we would reach out to you and say, hey, it looks like you missed something. We found this here, so please go back and update your profile. And if you don't do that, then we're going to enter findings into CFAX that go against your ATL. So you'll start getting governance findings. And that's kind of like the teeth behind everything is, and I don't think anybody will ever get there, but if you have enough issues and problems with governance, that's increasing the risk posture of your system with the agency and how it operates. So we could get to the point of revoking your ATL.
And then I'll add from the technology side of things, there's another tech topic coming up. It's about CDM, right? Continuous diagnostic and mitigation, where we're trying to instrument all of CMS's, especially the cloud, our data centers, in a way that we can actually tell in real time what's going on with the system. That's one part. The second part is our DevSecOps program, right? Where in real time we want to instrument your pipeline, whatever pipeline you may use, as your CI/CD, Jenkins, Circle CI, whatever, and try to give you some scripts that can actually monitor what you're doing. And we'll look at the configuration of things in real time from our security. And that's where security is going. Real-time accreditation, ongoing. So it's not so much as paperwork, but we can validate and verify what's happening. That's part of it. And then there will be a little bit more about that when I cover the IT Alliance piece on how the agency is coming together from the senior leadership that will add to this and where the support is coming from. Any other questions online? Please step up. If you have questions here in the room, please step up to the microphone because we have a lot of people online. Can we actually?
Question.
You want to take this one, George?
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yes. Good morning. So again, I appreciate the presentation as well. It seems like a very exciting step in the right direction. My question is, so a lot of the presentation focused on the governance-related aspects of this. So you have the collection of all the EA-related information. You've got the Navigator program for assistance. You have a streamlined set of stage gates. My question is, has there been much thought given to how to actually share this information with the broader CMS IT community so that they can then discover some of these connections themselves? So for example, you mentioned, are there, potential interfaces that we could hook into? Are there systems that we could talk to? Maybe someone wants to know who else is using this product, right? Maybe I can talk to them. So we have this universe of information, and you're doing all the analytics on it. But half the value could theoretically be if you expose that to the community to discover it for themselves so they can have those organic connections on their own. Mm-hmm. So has there been any thought to the tool and your instrumentation of how you would provide that capability?
Yes, there has, a little bit. We're not quite there yet, but so I've been working very closely with the Navigator folks and PMNSG in that area. And what we're also doing is we're trying to give a visual of the information. So for a particular business owner, they could go and log in and say, well, show me all of my systems and where I am in the life cycle and what are the steps that I need to take. So they've done some really great work on that already. I think it's probably too detailed to show it at Tech Topics, but hopefully you'll be seeing in the near future all the fruits of that effort. And we've done human-centered design, working with other components and things to get feedback on that particular tool. So yes, we have that. Then we also plan on having some data visualization efforts as well. So agency-wide dashboards, very high-level information. So you could say, what are the software products that CSIO is running? What are the software products that OC is running? Who across the agency is running Oracle products? So those are the types of things that we have and forward looking towards the future.
Okay, thank you.
And there's one more in here. Yes.
Good morning. So I have two questions. I'll give you the easiest one first. In regards to the 508 testing, I know that I believe there's a slide in the TRB when they do theirs. But what I'm proposing or inquiring about is at what point will it show up on the the TLC, simply because those who are still not educated on 508 from a testing IT, only from a documentation perspective, we've got a lot of systems out there that still have not been tested. So it's either a recommendation, or you can let me know whether it's thought of or it's going to stay on the TRB. I'm just concerned about those that get missed or stay engaged in the IT side of the 508 testing. That's my first question. Then the second question is regarding OAGM as far as acquisition. When it comes to the SOW, are you guys going to work on a draft recommended language for the cores so that we can ensure that we're tweaking the SOW accordingly once we get to, before we get to June 20th, before it goes into implementation, so as new contracts come on or mods are made, we can make sure that the SOW, and I say recommended because based on the system, of course, you've got to tweak it a little, but at least a standard language, that's all.
So yeah, thank you for those questions. So number one on the first one with 508, so we've been working closely with AJ and Aaron Allen and those folks. If you look in that guidance document, one of the triggers is going to be about 508 review and the timeframes that occur for that. So I know Aaron's working on more of a cadence kind of base review for 508 type implementation. So we'll have a date of when was the last time you had 508 testing completed, what were the results of those testings. Then if there are open findings, we would have a sort of like a 6-month delay trigger sort of deal, or 3 months, whatever they end up coming up with. So once it hits that trigger, it'll say, hey, now's maybe the time for the 508 team to reach back out to this project, make sure they're on the right track, they're making progress towards their 508 compliance. Acquisition, we haven't worked on any statement of work language yet. We will be
So,
working on some
On
of
that one, I can give you some information. So part of the CALM project out of OAGM is really, and this is where our CIO is working with the Chief Acquisition Officer as well, right? Melissa Storinsky out of OAGM. His vision, working with her and her team, is really to come up with this playbook, really, menu where you can sort of select which type of language will fit that statement of work to make your life that much easier and automate that process. And that's what the activities that are happening today. And actually, they'll be presented in here as well. It's a cloud solution that they'll begin sort of having those capabilities that will make it available internally to us so we can begin that collaboration. So we don't have to start over from scratch over and over and over. But yeah, we want to get there. So that's ongoing. Any other questions from the phone?
This is Ben. I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
I had a question regarding the streamlining of stages and your gates. I'm wondering what governance does your new TRA use to make systems and keep the IT documentation current and make it available to CMS. And when I say documentation, I'll give a couple of examples that are pain points that I've seen in our area. Logical and physical data models, data dictionaries, SLAs on high availability, SLAs on disaster recovery. And then I had a follow-up question, which is where would one find your triggers and profile or census documentation that you've referenced? And I can repeat the first question if it was a
Yeah,
mouthful.
can you please repeat the first part? That'd be
So the
helpful.
first question was what governance, what specific things are more streamlined now with the TRA. So I wonder which area or what you use to govern making sure that IT documentation is kept, critical IT documentation for the life cycle is kept current. Stuff like the data models, logical and physical models, and data dictionaries, or SLAs, or disaster recovery, or high availability, things that are easy to fall by the wayside if they're not part of one of your. I don't know if it's a trigger or if it's somewhere in your one of your gate reviews. It's easy for something like that to not keep updated or made available to the agency.
Okay, yeah, I definitely understand that question now, so thank you. At the very end of the profile, at least it's the end right now, we've added sort of some new fields there. So one of the things that we showed in the slides was sort of the required documentation for each of the phases. But you see it's not a requirements document, it just says requirements. And it's not a design document, it just says design. One of the things we're asking for Target Lifecycle is not that you give us your latest design or you give us your latest requirements, that it can exist wherever it exists now and how you do your work. But what you're going to do within the profile is you're going to tell us where those particular documents are stored. So it's kind of an attestation that, number one, you have them, and number two, they're there. So the only thing that we have within the guidance document that we'll ask is that you're able to produce those things within 48 hours, because if we get a GAO audit or an OIG audit and they're asking for this documentation from a particular system, we're going to come to you and say, hey, you said your requirement documents are there. We didn't ask for access, we didn't ask to see it, but we need it now for the review because the OIG is asking for it, and you have 48 hours to give it to us. So that's a good way of keeping everything where it is. We didn't want to create this huge central data set on all this governance documentation that's stored in one location that you have to consistently update. You can leave everything where it is today. We just have that location in your profile where it's stored.
Right, so that's a good point of clarification, right? So we all know we have to document the systems. That requirement doesn't go away. What we're saying is we don't want you to take what you already documented in Confluence, Jira, whatever other source you're using, and try to format it using a specific template, because that takes time, that takes resources, it costs money. What we want to do is you have it already. You have to have it, right? Because we all know in this environment we do change contractors, and that information needs to be made available in order to do transitions and so forth. So we're saying you keep the documentation. Let us know where it is. It has to be accessible, but it has to exist in whichever format you feel is best, but it has to be there. And that's the big change that I'm trying to make instead of, but obviously if you do need a template because you don't have any better ways to, we will have that for you as well, but it won't be like you have to do it this way anymore.
Sure. And you
Okay.
said that is in your, in the census documentation? The requirement for that. I'm curious about the wording, because we'd like to put some sort of wording that makes it flexible, like you've described, but also doesn't requires them to keep it current. That's an issue with projects not keeping critical documentation current.
Right, so I mean, that's the one area, right, that I think what I'm hearing from the question is making sure that that is included, that is not missed, right?
Flexible but comprehensive.
Right. So we are going to be working with it. Another piece that we're doing out of this, because it is a process, right? And we know that if we keep it a manual process, it's very hard to follow and enforce. So one of the things that we are working in parallel for the Navigator, the TRB, and every other service, including 508, securities, we want to automate all of these. And we want to give you total transparency. And that's going to be little by little. So first, we're going to try to have this Navigator piece, right? Make sure that it's automated in some system. Then we're going to be adding TRB. How do we engage and link those two so there is visibility? We're going to probably create one for 508. We're going to create one for security. We're going to create one for privacy, which is other areas where, there is a lot of work happening, but sometimes you don't know where you are in that process. So all of this, hopefully, this is a journey. It's not we just getting started with this, but this is the concept, to try to automate and link all of those different requirements till we get to the level of specificity. But we can see it and you can see it. But I mean, this is one of the things that our CIO keeps asking us, right? Projects come to me, people come to me, I have an open door policy, I know about issues, challenges, I go and talk to my CIO and say, I mean, his question is, okay, this is great, but is there a place that I can go to where I can find those answers myself? And today, the answer is no. So we want to get there so he has that visibility, what bubbles up to the top, what requires his attention, and what doesn't, what is going normal, right? But even you, from your project, from a contractor perspective, you want to know where you are in the process. So we'll get there, be patient, but that's the journey. Okay? Question in the room.
Sharing.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I think this is a great start, with the transformation. One quick question. I think it looks like you guys are planning to roll for draft guidance on February 19th. Are you guys entertaining any comment from the contractor communities? If so, can you shed some light on the process for the feedback loop?
So what we've done is we've released the guidance document through SWIFT, which is kind of like a way to hit all of the agency managers. We also have a community of practice meeting for all of the Agile teams, and it's kind of like a work group, more or less, of cross components. So we've issued that out to them and their contractors. So they're taking a look at that. I don't know, George, if we want to go external.
Yeah, so we'll have that, but we do want your input. Bottom line, because like he said at the very beginning, it's a concept, we're getting started, it's gonna be iterative. And the more input that you give us from what you see day in and day out will make this that much better, right? So our goal, as you can see here, is to be flexible to enable you. Now, don't let governance get in the way of your project, but at the same time, we need to keep, up to date with the standards and the federal regulations that we need to adhere to. So it's a balance, but yeah, we'll find a way to make it available to you guys, and we'll tweet this out or put it in zone. We'll figure it out, okay?
And I can say if you have an existing system at CMS, I would reach out to your business owners and say, hey, I know this thing is out there right now. You may not have gotten your attention, but it's something you should pay attention to. So I'm happy to, get that from you guys and sit down with you guys and kind of talk through what this means for our program. I think that's something you should start doing today.
Any other questions on the phone? I know we still have over 200 people there. Yes, no? And I just give you a couple closing on this. As you can see, we're trying to be extremely flexible, right? But it takes two to tango, right? So you got to help us as well, because if things don't work from your end and we start to see that there is lack of transparency, there is lack of documentation, we're going to do everything possible to provide the resources to the teams to be successful. But we need your help, from a contractor community especially, because you're doing the work. You know what's happening, right? To let us know where the information is, to make it accessible to us, and then to work with us in the different things that we're trying to do from the project perspective. At the end of the day, we're trying to support our business partners, right? We're trying to deliver that product, and we want to help you be successful. That's the key. And we'll do whatever it takes to really help you and remove any barriers, technical challenges, and that's what we're trying to get to, really, to be sure that there's no things. And this is a big one, documentation. And I think that the first slide that he showed, we had over 52 artifacts, right? Everybody looked at that, okay, that's going to cost $10 million, because look at the documentation, right? That's not a smart way of spending our funding, right? We want to be innovators. We want to create outcomes. We want to create products, because that's what our business needs in order to do the functions that they do. So that's what we want to get to. But you got to help us as well to be sure that we don't use this as a way to shortcome or try to get around some of these things. We need that information as well, and then to help you. Okay, I want to thank the team here, Phil, Aaron, and Ann, for a great, wonderful presentation. And I think I'm up next for TRB. So. Yes, please. So, this presentation dovetails very nicely to what we just had in terms of removing barriers, technical barriers, challenges, and trying to make it easier on you, right? Technical governance, I think this is not new. Hopefully, this is not a surprise. You've seen this, how we changed the TRA for being very product specific to being very open, And I always say this every time I'm here, is we're technology agnostic for the most part. There's a few exceptions, but we are technology agnostic. What product, which vendor, really I am very open to. I think where the industry is today, there's so much out there, and I'm learning every day, which is fantastic, and it gives you that opportunity to bring those innovations to us in terms of how we do data, BIs, and so forth. So that's what we want to be. So the TRB obviously has to change as well, right? One of the things that we've seen, right, in the last year, we started this last year, sort of like a pilot. I didn't tell anybody we were just doing it. But it was a nice surprise, I know that for a long time, the TRB has been around probably, since 2004, 2005. We've done specific reviews. You know, you have your startup review, which is no longer part of it. Then you have your preliminary design review, the detailed design, and so forth, right? And you will come to this big room, and, you know, it's kind of funny because when our CIO came to one of the TRB, that was the first thing he wanted to do is, I want to go into the TRB review sessions. And he sat there with us. And he's like, you know, the room looks so big, so intimidating. The reason we went to the big room, it was because we had big crowds coming in. But then that became like, and then we had smaller groups coming to the TRB, but the original intent was to accommodate the big teams coming to the TRB. But then it became a little bit of too intimidating. So now we're switching that. I mean, that little factor, it started out with a good intention, but then it became something that it was not so good anymore, right? But that, it's a wake-up call for us to change. Just because it worked before, that doesn't mean it's going to work all the time. And this is one of those changes, the one-on-one engagements, right? So what we're finding out is that sometimes during the TRBs, you'll find the guys and the team there really asking questions. And they're trying to get a context. They're trying to catch up on what you're doing. It's not like it's an inquisition. They just want to know because what you're saying, sometimes you've been working so closely to it, and you know what's going on, but the TRB doesn't. So that really sometimes created, they couldn't review everything. So one of the things, even in an hour or 2 hours, it was just too much. So instead of doing that is, what we did is we made it an offering out there called the one-on-one consultation, so consulting as a service. And really, this is where your team can come to the TRB at any time and just request a one-on-one. What does that mean? They'll come to you. They'll meet with your project team. It's not you coming to the TRB in this big room anymore. It's the TRB coming and sitting with your team in your meetings. Have the design, talk it. I mean, whiteboard, what are you thinking? And this can be done as many times as it is needed in order to give you that sense of comfort, because I know that technology is changing. We're doing a lot of things with the cloud. You know, we're in AWS East. There's an effort going on in AWS West. We're going to also, our next GovCloud, we got Azure, VMware is going to be, I mean, there's a lot going on. So you may not know all of those things, right? We want to impart that knowledge to you in a setting that is comfortable. So it becomes consultation. It's a one-on-one, talk to them, and that's what we want to sort of move forward. And that has been very, very well taken. And I think we have some stats later. And then the other piece is the proactive technical guidance, right? So this is where you're coming in with new technologies that we haven't seen before. And you may have some questions that we don't know how that will work. That's okay though, because we want those. We want the TRB to do the research, and I personally review each one of those papers because I want to make sure that the context is right, what it means to the agency. You know, luckily enough, I've been around long enough in CMS, and I've seen it grow technologically, that I understand how certain things can fit and what it really means from a context perspective. So I want to use that sort of knowledge or gift, if you will, to share it, make sure that the paper clears that. So when and we'll work with the team on that, right? So one of the cases that I always bring up is Amazon S3, the storage, right? That was, if everybody understands the storage, that storage is universal. It's open to anyone in S3 and AWS, right? There's no government, but there's a way that we found to isolate those buckets to ensure that the security is still in place and we're not creating any vulnerabilities. And that's the type of research that we want to work with you guys, you know. We had a team from CPI. They brought in another sort of technology called AWS Lambda, for those that know it. Again, so we didn't know about it, but Lambda is another of those services that AWS offers, and it goes all over AWS. But what does it really mean to CMS? So we created guidance working with the team to say, you want to use it, that's fine, but use it in this way. So it won't hinder your effort. And it's kind of funny because the project at the end decided not to use it. But that's not the point. That knowledge, okay, is kept within CMS, and we share that across, and that guidance becomes a new guidance for anybody else that may want to use that technology. So we're trying to use your effort, you know, your initiative as a way to really educate and inform the rest of the agency. And that, in a point in time, really makes it into the TRA. Now, the TRB liaison membership, this is something that's for the feds, right? We have three components today. We have the Office of Communication, we got CCSQ, and CSIRO, where they instituted one member and they're under their organization to really be the gateway to the TRB. Meaning they can come to the TRB at any time they want to. They come to the meetings, they ask a question. Instead of setting up a consult, they just come and ask the question. 5 minutes, they have an answer, they walk away. And that's the type of bridge that we're trying to create. Any other organization that wants to set this up, they are welcome to it. We want to create easier ways to get the knowledge back to you or answer the questions that you may have. Because it's that simple. Sometimes it just take 5 to 10 minutes, done. They're not that complicated anymore. So consulting as a service, this is the one I talked about it, and you can see some of the numbers on the bottom. And in a given year, TRB has about 200 reviews a year. Max, we've gone to 300. Consulting as a service just went over 400, almost close to 500 in a very short period of time. This is not a whole year, just like a 6-month effort. People want it, and we haven't advertised it that much, really. Okay, people want it. They like that one-on-one. They may call the guys, 2-3 times. They're there. They're invited. It could be a phone call. It could be a meeting. It's up to you how you want to engage. And if they have questions, they come to me. So they have access to me for the questions. If not, we talk to whomever and find the answers and give them back to you. Again, this is the point of enabling your projects and your efforts to move forward without having to wait for a big meeting to be scheduled, preparing all these big presentations. Although at times that may be required if it's big enough, right? So that's what Aaron was referring to, situational, right? So if we see this is a large effort and we touch multiple pieces, it may be a good idea to bring it all together so everybody understands the different pieces, how they come together. So we don't want to sort of do away with it because there's some good to it, but at the same time, if we don't have to, we don't have to. We want to save time and move you faster. That's what consulting as a service is. So use it. Let us know. And just contact the TRB via the email that they have, or you can send me an email personally, and I'll make sure that someone gets in touch with your project. Proactive technical, I think I covered this one already. This is what we call the research spotlight, and we have a lot of these out there already from different technologies. And what we do with this really is, and this is where the TRA comes into play, right? So I want to make sure that the knowledge, so the research papers are very specific to one technology. The TRA is very much more broader, agnostic, but there's a lot of concepts that apply to it, right? So we want to make sure that the TRA is also in pace with the research. But we don't want the research to wait until the TRA is published because there is a process to it, and it takes a few months to release it. So, but we wanted to put it, these papers can be out in a couple of weeks, and then that's your guidance. And that we're trying to add agility into the process. We don't want to, but we still want to make sure that it gets documented and captured somewhere. So we have those two types of documentations that can sort of reflect, if you will, the outcome of this research. So you can have this, I have it right here. And this should be just as good as our review. This is just some more of the papers that we had in here. There's plenty of them, and they keep adding them. So the more we get, the more we want to be working on it. And actually, to tell you the truth, for me, these papers are fantastic because I learned about the technology. And I'm a techie at heart, okay? So I love reading these papers and going through them. How are we going to define new services? What is the new service architecture that CMS is going to implement for systems? And there's some of them in there, actually. We're trying to sort of change what the good old 3-zone was in a different way that it lends more easily to the developer mindset. Because you think in a different way, and the old 3-zone was based on a network technology at the time, over 10 years ago. So we're trying to come back and say, what does that really mean from the cloud perspective? So that's there too as well. Gray source, so they are all in Zone, but we can make them available as well. And if you want to know how to access Zone, just go to Twitter and look for the hashtag CMS Converge, and you'll find instructions on how to get into Zone, okay? We put it all out there now. I talked about the TRB liaison membership. Again, this is for the feds. Let me see, the TRA. So now, the TRA, we used to have like questions on that actually. Let me ask about the TRB and the services. Hopefully it's not a surprise, and if it is a surprise, it's a good one. Anyone? No? On the phone? No? please, because we have people on the phone. There's a question here. They wanted to yell from way the back, but
Very quick. How long does it typically take to schedule the consultant to come on site?
really, it's just as the schedules align. It could be within a week.
Okay.
In a couple of days, once we assign a TRB member to that inquiry, it's just a matter of you coordinating with them, and then they're pretty much available.
Okay. And I'm assuming local areas like
Yes, we
Northern
try to keep it
Virginia.
locally. We can't go out of the country or anything like that, right?
Let's not be hasty there.
Unless it's a nice country, vacation in Bahamas. Any on the phone? Anything? No. Okay. So I go to the TRA. So the TRA has gone through his own transformation, right? So we used to have like over 30 volumes of different separate documents, and they were all Word. So they're not the easiest thing to search, right? And then we went from those to 5 volumes, but they're still Word and they're still PDFs, right? So it's not the easier. So we're like, and actually, the MITRE is our scribe for the TRA, right? They came to us and said, there was a better way. And actually, we're thinking about automation, but I wasn't even thinking automation of documents. Because it's something that is, it's the TRA, it's PDFs. But it takes some time to someone ask that question. You're like, oh, that's a great idea. So what are we trying to do there, really? The diagrams, I'll come back to these. But what we're trying to do in the TRA really is, and this is what we're going to be formulating. And when I said earlier about we're working on a system that will automate the TRB interactions, some of the navigator interactions, we want to make this part of it as well, the TRA, the Technical Reference Architecture. So there is technology out there, actually, that can sort of take all this documentation and package it nicely and create an HTML5. What does that mean? It creates a website for you instantaneously, and it's searchable, and you can tag things. You can go in there and search and say, I want that, highlight for me the latest changes from the last release of the TRA. Boom, it creates a whole highlight for you, so you can see what changed. Today, on paper, we can't do that, right? Now, without a lot of work, burdensome work. So we're trying to get there, and we want to make this available out there some way, somehow, to our contractor community, because I know that's always been the question around, can you see that information? Because sometimes it's deemed too sensitive. But we want to see with the latest changes if that can be at least released in some form so you can make it available. I know internally, this will be available. Hopefully in the next couple of months, we will make this available internally. So it can be explored, you can be searched, and you can find things and link the topics together so you know what you're looking for and what sections are you looking for. But that's what we want to be too. So I'm trying to not leave the TRA behind from all this automation and all those things. Because I think, from a knowledge-based perspective, this still serves as a good indication or a good reference for new contractors, because there's new contractors all the time that want to do business with us, and we want to make sure they get a fair opportunity to understand what CMS. CMS is huge. For those who have been around here, we're large and it takes a lot, but at least it gives you a little bit of a leg up, if you will, in that process. When it comes to diagrams, we did create some samples, right? Because systems are complex. They're not easy. Understanding what the architecture looks like, understanding what the performance metrics are, the security, what the software stack is. And the software stack really helps us to see something, to see if that requires a research paper, for instance. It's not to say, hey, don't use that. No, we never seen this before. We heard some things, but let us do a paper. Let's work with you, understand that better. So these are just samples. You can bring your own as long as they sort of convey the same information. But this is that perspective from a system, right, that all of us should be including. Where's it going to be hosting? How many clouds? Is there a traditional hosting? Where's the overall architecture from an overall context and the different touch points, right? Performance is key. In the cloud, I know there's a lot of scalability type options. But if you're not there, what is it that you're doing? There's always a cost to it. And then security, of course, right? And then the physical, although that physical piece is becoming less and less prominent because everything is becoming virtual. but it's still there is a part of it. I know in AWS, everything is much more different the way it is. But we just want to know. So this is just samples. Don't take them as verbatim, right? But we want to know the types of information to help you again, to make sure that you are accounting for those things. And this is the types of information you can talk to the TRB. You know, what do you mean by security? You know, do we need to encrypt? Do we don't need to encrypt? You know, passwords. What do you mean by performance? Okay, and what does it really mean? And with as we mature more and more into our cloud offering, a lot of those things become more easily sort of available to you from what we mean utilization-wise when it comes to performance, right? So you can sort of make sure you architect the application in such way that it can take advantage of those capabilities. And the software stack, again, I think I just talked about that. Any questions on that? Because really, that's the message. This is not to audit, but we want to make sure that you are thinking of those things, because at the end of the day, you got to be successful in thinking of these things, right? We help you make that system be ready. So I think, Zone, this is where to learn more about it, it's accessible to everyone. It's an external collaboration site. Tech Topics and the CMS, that's for the internals, the SharePoint site. And, you know, schedule and TRB reviews, so you can schedule, or you can just use them to contact them to find a person to work with you, a consultant to work with you. And some of the links there, but you have it in your materials. Any questions? Anyone here or on the phone about, and then I have one more topic, and I think some of you may be very interested in this. No? Okay. Let me see. Hold on, we have some extra materials there that shouldn't be there. Can we switch to the IT Alliance piece, please? So what is the IT Alliance? Has anybody heard of the IT Alliance? Can you see some hands? I see one in the back, 2, 3. Okay, at least there is a rumor out there. That's good. You know, initially when IT Alliance, the concept was being sort of worked out, we called it the IT Underground. And that was the first meeting that we had. And it was on purpose. We wanted to keep it a secret so that way it will get around. Because when you try to keep a secret here at CMS, the word spreads like wildfire. So it's working. It's working. So IT Alliance. So, I mean, you can read it in terms of what's there, but let me tell you the context behind the IT Alliance. When I became the CTO, you know, one of the things that I learned about our decentralized IT environment is there's a lot of IT shops out there. Everybody was doing all kinds of different things. So really, I started sort of meeting with those leadership, the executives there at every IT shop across CMS to understand, create a report, because relationships here at CMS are crucial. You gotta talk to the people. So little by little, you know, getting to know what they're doing, their priorities, how can we help, a lot of these things happen. You know, as the word got around that we were meeting more and more and more and talking with my CIO at the time, you know, he's like, what can we do this in a way that we can bring everybody together at the same time? I know you do one-on-ones, but what about all of us hearing the same things? And that's sort of, I think this is the perfect time, because I have been meeting with these executives for at least a couple of years, and that, you know, we were learning new things, but is it a time for us to get together, all of us, in one place? And have those type of strategic discussions that are real, not just, you know, what, you know, a big strategy will be, but what is really happening? What is the pains that you're having? And that's what we're trying to get to with IT Alliance. IT Alliance is really composed of all the senior executives in the IT side of the house across CMS, and we come together and try to talk about the priorities, try to strategize in a real way, okay, things that we want action. We don't want just to talk. We want to really, and this is when someone asked about the teeth, That's what this membership comes about. That's the value. This membership is sort of becoming much more recognized across the agency, so because they know what's going on from their shops. They know what's going on. The CCSQ representative, he knows what's happening from IT, not only from the IT infrastructure plan priority, but also funding budgets, right? So he knows what's important to him. CMMI is part of it as well. CMMI does a lot of IT. They know what's going on. They have some ideas, and they want to share those to see if there's ways for us to partner with each other. And it's a way for us to recognize challenges. One of the challenges that we had in the cloud was that there could only be one master account, right? It was GDIT. And I know in our business, sometimes hosting is being provided by a small business. So we didn't want to go through the small business to the large business to get to the hosting. It's just too many hubs. So actually, that triggered a project for us, and you'll see it here later in the year, called Cloud Tamer, which is an accounting to be able to see how you're utilizing the cloud resources and so forth. But that really was born out of those discussions. That's a real challenge. I can't use GDIT. I have my own contract. How do I overcome that? So those are the types of things where we want to take action. And the little symbol in there about the IT Alliance is, and I think it's in here, really, when I saw this, I was like, this speaks to what we want to be. We're all equal. So we have the CIO, the CTO, and all of the IT executives across the agency at one table, because we wanted to be partners. We're all equal. It's not like just the CIO. And that's the mantra that we sort of keep in those discussions. So we meet once a month now. But we want all of those components. You'll see, all the major components are there: CM, CPI, CMCS, CSIO, OAGM, OFM, OSSO, OIRA, CCSQ, and CMMI. But to me, this is a big transformation in a way how CMS, being in a distributed environment, knowing that every center and office has their own set of priorities. That's the reality. And you can't sort of impact those priorities. You got to work with them. But sometimes there's not enough time for us to understand the different things that are happening. So this is one way where we can at least help on the IT side. How can we work together? And what is the challenge you have from a security perspective? ATO comes up all the time. Privacy comes up all the time. And I'll be honest, so we're working on those. We actually taking action. But that's the sort of, I want you to know that we are coming together as an agency. Again, you can read this at your leisure, but it's about to coordinate activities, increase sharing of information. These are busy executives. They don't have time to go to, all of these reviews. So this is a way where we try to highlight some of the key elements that are important to them, because we know if they know about it, they'll support it all the way down to their organization. So that's another way for us to sort of create a level of governance. And I use that word very, very loosely because that's not the point. But the point is for them to understand why we're taking certain actions. For instance, CDM, or continuous diagnosis and mitigation, is a big effort, right? So where are we going with that? What do they need to know? Why do they care? What is the impact that it could have to their existing projects and so forth? So they can weigh in also and let us know, so we can sort of take that input and change, be flexible about it. So one of the things, so we have an agenda. How do we work it? What we did last year is we had an IT Alliance offsite where all the components, those major players, share with us really their priorities, their top 3 priorities. And we created a whole list. And from that, we created themes out of it. And that drives the agenda. And we had enough material to last our priorities a couple of years. And that's what's driving, trying to see which topic do we tackle first, right? And that's what we're trying to do. APIs and data are huge. So recently we had a CMS Data Summit and API Summit that was born out of this too, because there was a lot of data activities happening across the agency, data warehouses, copying data all over the place. Now with this new opportunity of the cloud, there's a real good chance for us to really leverage the work that other projects are doing. In the past, it was always dependencies, the technology wasn't there, but now the technology is there. So that's what we want to take advantage of and share that knowledge. And that's creating a lot of, opening a lot of eyes, because even they are learning. projects are learning. But that's what we want to do from there, okay? And then that's what we sort of going to be sort of iterating through this process month to month to month, and then hopefully we'll get to a point where the agency is closer aligned and is still having their individual program level, center level priorities in IT, because they still need to function that way. We feel that that's the way. We're not going to change that. We just need to go with it and adjust to that. So that's what this allows us to do. Strategic agenda, you can see all of the topics that we talked about already. There's just a lot of stuff. And what else is coming, what we just talked about, and this is just to give you a little bit of insight on what we do and what we talk about. So we do meet the third Friday of every month. We have decision logs, we do have meetings, we try to operate and capture the information as much as possible. And we are in Confluence, actually. But I mean, to me personally, is bringing the agency together where the power is. But the agency is not just bringing a bunch of people, bringing the right people so we can sort of if you are able to work with someone at the top level that has that decision-making power, that can trickle down all the way to projects. But at the same time, those individuals can influence the change for CMS. And so it has to be a yin and yang, I guess, effort. It's a give and take. And that's what we want to get to. We've only been getting together for about a year. We just had an anniversary past December. So we're still young, I would say, in that regard. So we're going to keep the momentum going. So far, it's good, it's strong. And there's a the great thing is that the members, the executives, have a very good perception of the value that these gatherings bring. And it's not just to, chit-chat, but really is to how do we move forward CMS. And I figured it was important for you to know that we are making those efforts, right? That it's not just we are siloed. We're trying to break down those silos. We're really trying to work with everyone and share the knowledge from our perspective. I mean, we are a large organization. It's going to take time. But just like you saw the changes today, IT governance, TRB, we are trying to sort of innovate ourselves and reinvent on the things that we did today. Any questions? That's all I have. Please come to the microphone. I can give you names, though.
Elena's going to kill me if I ask. Anyway, I'm curious, if the IT Alliance consists of all of the CIOs of the organizations, how are you guys incorporating funding? Are you considering investments for the future and identifying
We share a
bets
lot
on
of those. Yes, we share a lot of those priorities. What's coming in terms of the overall. There's a whole budgeting process that the federal government does, and they are part of it as well. Okay. So we do know what's happening across the agency from that perspective. There's a lot of transparency.
Okay, are you using that to develop guidance for recommendations for future investments?
Yes, little by little. We're just getting started in that aspect, but because we didn't want to sort of go, we shall do this. We wanted really to sort of evolve and be organic in a sense, right? Because we really didn't know how this would work. But it's working in a way that we hope it is productive. And I know you don't get to see it, but I see a lot of positive vibes and energy, which is exciting to me. Any other questions in the room? On the phone? So I close with next month. So all the materials will be in SharePoint and then Zone. So Zone, I think I told you, Twitter, CMS Converge, hashtag, you'll find it all. Next tech topic will be March 19th. And we have 3 exciting topics. It's going to be a year of change in here. CMS DevSecOps, the Comprehensive Accreditation of Controls Tested, ACT, which is kind of like the new ATO process, and the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation, where we are with CDM. I know this is very important to you because everybody wants to know about it, where we are from an instrumentation perspective, the visibility, mapping servers to FISMA systems, all kinds of good stuff. So that's what we are. That's all I have. No other questions. Thank you, and I'll see you next month.